Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 5, Chapter 20, Death. Communion was administered the next morning. Nikolai prayed fervently during the ceremony. Passionate and hopeful entreaty could be read in his great eyes gazing at the sacred image placed on a card table covered with a colored towel. It was terrible for Levin to look at him so, for he knew that the pain of tearing himself from life, to which he clung so desperately, would be all the more cruel. He knew his brother and his brother's ideas, knew that his skepticism was not the result of a desire to abandon religion for the sake of a freer life. His religious beliefs had been shaken by the theories of modern science. Therefore, his return to faith was not logical or normal, owing simply to his overmastering desire for recovery. It could not be anything else than temporary and unreal. Kitty had formed this hope of her story of extraordinary cures. Levin was troubled by these thoughts as he looked at his brother's hopeful face, as he saw his difficulty in lifting his emaciated hand to touch his yellowed forehead to make the sign of the cross, and saw his fleshless shoulders and his hollow, rattling chest, unable longer to contain the life which he was begging to have restored. During the sacrament, Levin did what he had done 1,000 times, skeptic that he was. "Heal as man if thou dost exist," he said, addressing God, "and thou wilt save me also." The invalid felt suddenly better after this ceremony. For more than an hour, he didn't cough once. He assured Kitty, as he kissed her hand with smiles and tears of joy, that he wasn't suffering, and that he felt a return of strength and appetite. When broth was brought, he got up by himself and asked for a cutlet. Impossible as his recovery was, Levin and Kitty spent this hour in a kind of timid joy. "Isn't he better? Much better. Oh, astonishing. Why should it be astonishing? He's certainly better," they whispered, smiling at each other. The illusion didn't last. After a painful nap of half an hour, the invalid was wakened by a terrible spell of coughing. The hopes vanished for all, even for the sick man himself. Forgetting his belief of an hour before, and ashamed even to remember it, he asked for a bottle of iodine to breathe. Levin gave it to him, and his brother looked at him with the same imploring, passionate look which he had given to the image, as if to confirm the words of the doctor, who attributed miraculous virtues to iodine. "Kitty isn't here?" he asked in a hoarse whisper, when Levin would unwillingly repeat the doctor's words. "No? Then I can speak. I played the comedy for her sake. She's so sweet. But you and I cannot deceive ourselves. This is what I pin my faith to," said he, pressing the bottle in his long hands as he smelled the iodine. About 8 o'clock in the evening, Levin and his wife were taking tea in their room when Marya Nikolaevna came running towards them, all out of breath. She was pale and her lips trembled. "He's dying," she stammered. "Oh, I'm afraid that he's dying." Both of them hurried to Nikolai. He was sitting up, leaning over one side of the bed, his head bowed, his long back bent. "How do you feel?" asked Levin tenderly, after a moment of silence. "I feel that I'm going," whispered Nikolai, struggling painfully to speak, but as yet pronouncing the words distinctly. Without raising his head, he turned his eyes towards his brother, whose face he could no longer see. "Katya, go away," he whispered once again. Levin led his wife gently from the room. "I'm going," the dying man whispered once again. "Why do you think so?" asked Levin, for the sake of saying something. "Because I'm going," he repeated, as if he had an affection for the praise. "It's the end." Marya Nikolaevna came to him. "Lie down, you'll feel better." "Soon I shall be lying calmly, dead," he whispered with a sort of mournful irony. "No, bury me wherever you please." Levin set his brother down on the back, took a seat near him, and, hardly able to breathe, studied his face. The dying man's eyes were shut, but the muscles of his forehead twitched from time to time, as though he were in deep thought. Levin involuntarily tried to unriddle what was passing in the dying man's mind. The stern face and the play of the muscles above his eyebrows seemed to show him that his brother perceived mysteries hidden from him. Yes, so," the dying man murmured slowly with long pauses. "Lay me down." Then long silence followed. "So," said he suddenly, as though all had been explained to him. "O Lord," and he sighed heavily. Marya Nikolaevna felt of his feet. "They're growing cold," she said in a low voice. Long the sick man remained motionless, but he was still alive and sighed from time to time. Weary from the mental strain, Levin felt that he couldn't understand what his brother meant to express. He seemed to be far away from the dying man. He could no longer think of the mystery of death. The most incongruous ideas came into his mind. He asked himself what he was going to do. To close his eyes, dress him, or to the coffin? Strange. He felt cold and indifferent. The principal feeling that he had was one of almost envy. His brother would now know the certainty which he himself could not approach. Long he waited by his bedside, expecting the end. It didn't come. The door opened and Kitty came in. He got up to stop her, but instantly the dying man moved. "No, don't go away," said Nikolai, stretching out his hand. Levin took it and angrily motioned his wife away. Still holding the dying man's hand, he waited a half hour, an hour, still another hour. He ceased to think of death. He thought what Kitty was doing. Who could it be that had the next room? Had the doctor a house of his own? Then he became hungry and sleepy. He gently let go of the dying man's hand and felt of his feet. They were cold, but still Nikolai was breathing. Levin tried to stand on his tiptoes, but again the invalid stirred and said, "Don't go away." Morning. The situation was unchanged. Levin gently arose and, without looking at his brother, went to his room, threw himself on the bed, and fell asleep. When he awoke, instead of hearing of his brother's death as he expected, he was told that he had come to his senses again. He was sitting up in bed and wanted something to eat. He no longer spoke of death, but expressed the hope of getting well again, and was more irritable and restless than before. No one, not even his brother or Kitty, could calm him. He blamed everyone for his sufferings, demanded that the famous doctor from Moscow should be sent for, and whenever they asked him how he was, he replied with expressions of anger and reproach, "I am suffering terrible, unendurable agony." He suffered more and more, and his irritableness increased. Even Kitty couldn't control him, and Levin saw that she was suffering physically as well as morally, although she wouldn't confess it. The sadness caused by the approach of death was joined with other feelings. All knew that the end was inevitable. They saw an invalid almost dead, and they felt that the sooner it came, the better it would be. Yet still, they continued to give medicine, to call the doctor and try new remedies. But they deceived him and themselves and each other, and this dissimulation was more painful to Constantine than to others, because he loved his brother more deeply, and because nothing was more contrary to his nature than lack of sincerity. Levin, who had long felt the desire to reconcile the two brothers before Nikolai should die, wrote to Sergei Ivanovitch. He replied, and Constantine read the letter to the sick man. Sergei Ivanovitch could not come, but he asked his brother's pardon in touching terms. Nikolai said nothing. "What shall I write him?" asked Constantine. "I hope you'll not be angry with him." "No, not at all," replied Nikolai in a tone of vexation. "Write him to send me the doctor." 3 cruel days passed in this manner, the invalid remaining in the same condition. All those who saw him, the waiter and the landlord and all the lodgers and the doctor and Marya Nikolaevna and Levin and Kitty, wished only one thing, and spoke only of death. But the invalid alone did not express any such wish, and he continually grumbled because they did not send for the doctor. And he took his remedies, and he spoke of life. At rare moments, when he was under the influence of opiates, he would forget his pangs, and in a sort of doze confess what actually weighed on his mind as well as the others. "Ugh, if only this could end, or when this is over." His sufferings, growing more and more severe, did their works and prepared him to die. Every moment was a pang. Every member of his poor body caused him pain. The memories, the impressions, the thoughts of past were odious to him. The sight of those who surrounded him and their talk were a trial to him. Everybody felt it. No one dared to use any freedom of motion, to express a wish or an idea. Life for all concerned was concentrated in the feeling of the dying man's sufferings and an ardent desire to see him freed from them. The supreme moment came when death to him seemed desirable as a truce to his pains, even as a joy. Everything, hunger, weariness, thirst. These sensations, which once after suffering or privation caused him a certain pleasure, were now only painful. He could only hope to be delivered from the very source of his woes, from his tortured body. Without finding words to express his thought, he continued out of habit to ask for what once gave him comfort. "Turn me on the other side," he would say, and then immediately wished to return to his former position. "Give me bouillon. Take it away. Speak, and don't stay so still." And as soon as anyone began to speak, he would shut his eyes and show fatigue, indifference, disgust. On the 10th day after the arrival, Kitty was taken ill, and the doctor declared it was caused by her emotions and weariness. He advised quiet and rest. Yet, after dinner, she got up and went as usual with her work to Nikolai's room. He looked at her sternly and smiled scornfully when she told him that she had been ill. All day long he never ceased to cough and to groan piteously. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Worse," he replied with difficulty. "I'm in pain." "Where do you feel pain?" "All over." "You will see, it'll be all over today," said Marya Nikolaevna in an undertone. Levin hushed her. Thinking that his brother, whose ear was very acute, might hear, he turned and looked at him. Nikolai had heard, but the words made no impression. His look remained as reproachful and intense. "What makes you think so?" asked Levin, taking her into the corridor. "He tries to uncover himself." "What do you mean?" "This way," she said, plucking at the folds of her woolen dress. Levin himself noticed that all the day the invalid had been plucking at his bedclothes as though to uncover himself. Marya Nikolaevna's prediction came true. Towards evening, Nikolai had not strength enough to lift his arms, and his motionless eyes assumed an expression of concentrated attention. Even when his brother and Kitty bent over him in order that they might see them, this look remained unchanged. Kitty and the priest summoned to say the prayers for the dying. During the ceremony of the invalid, by whose bedside stood Konstantin, Kitty and Marya Nikolaevna gave no sign of life. But before the prayers were ended, he stretched himself a little, sighed, and opened his eyes. The priest, having finished the prayer, placed the crucifix on his icy brow. For a moment or two he stood silently near the bed, and he touched the fingers of the huge, bloodless hand of the dying man. "It's all over," he said at last, about to go away. Then suddenly Nikolai's lips trembled slightly, and from the depths of his breast came these words, which sounded distinctly in the room. "Not yet. Soon." A moment later his face brightened. A smile came to his lips, and the women hastened to perform the last service of his mortal toilet. All Levin's horror at the terrible enigma of death was awakened with the same intensity as on that autumn night when his brother came to see him. More than ever he felt his inability to fathom this mystery and the terror, now that he felt it was so near to him and so inevitable. His wife's presence prevented him from falling into despair, for in spite of his terrors he felt the need of living and loving. He felt that love alone saved him from despair, and became all the stronger and purer because it was threatened. And scarcely had this mystery of death taken place before he found himself face to face with another miracle of love and life equally unfathomable. The doctor told him of Kitty's hopes of maternity.